Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we try to make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Molly Volke.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. We're so excited tonight to be speaking with Ben Orlin of Math with Bad Drawings, my favorite of which being math games. But
Right?
we're really excited about that. We hope you are following along on Twitter, Facebook, or on our YouTube channel, Math for All. If you watch later, we try and go back through comments and make replies or send information if you need it. Additionally, new thing for us this week, the book is finally out.
Yes.
So didex.com. And that's all we'll say about this for now, but we're very excited about it and hope you are too, dealing with fractions, decimals, and integers. So more on that later.
Yeah.
We're excited to talk about Math with Bad Drawings. So we're going to go there.
Yes. And our guest today, as Heidi said, is Ben Orlin. And we're going to be talking about this interesting question. How do we bring students into the mathematical community? I feel like we've had a lot of conversations kind of surrounding this, so this should be interesting, but I think he has an interesting take on it. So Ben Orlin is a math teacher and the author of 3 books, including Math with Bad Drawings. And Heidi showed you one of his other books, which was Math Games with Bad Drawings, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's bring him in.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, no, I'm doing good. Yeah. Hi, good to see you both. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're pleased to have you here today. We always like to start with your math story. So tell us what your math story is.
Yeah, I think what's maybe weird about my math story for someone who's like, I've really given over my life to math. I'm like really to the people and like to friends and like to, I don't know, people I meet, like I'm a math guy. But for me, math really lives alongside all the other subjects. That's the way it was for me when I was in school. I didn't, I enjoyed math, but I was just kind of like school. I liked getting to sit at a desk and learn stuff. Like it was like I was really like the sort of like very in a way the school doesn't work for everybody. It's a weird bureaucratic setup. It just worked for me. It was just nice to sit down and somebody who knew a lot about a thing would go up and talk about it, and I would take some notes. Like I liked that math worked for me in that way. And then in college, similarly, I was a psych major before I was a math major, so I added as a second major in my senior year. And I always sort of in math was always just like one thread for me. It was never I was like, I know a lot of professional mathematicians, research mathematicians, and they're obsessive about math in a way that I admire and absolutely do not identify with. Mm-hmm. My feeling is like, I enjoy thinking about math for a little while, and then I like thinking about other things. So even as someone who, when I've been a full-time teacher, which right now I'm just teaching part-time, but, you're like thinking about math all day. But I guess what led me into teaching maybe, and this is another part of my math story, is that I like thinking about math and the ideas, but I also just love thinking about how people see those ideas, mm-hmm. And how they access those ideas, and what you see it fresh when you're trying to understand like what's the stumbling block for this person, or mm-hmm. what's the insight that they've had. So that's a bit of a splatter of thoughts on what my math story is. Oh, and then I suppose, right, in the last 5 years, I've sort of been a full-time writer. And I've been writing full-time the last 5 years. And what may be different about my books as opposed to other books you'll find on the math shelf is that they do weave in lots of other subjects. Mm-hmm. They sort of combine, there's bits of economics and there's bits of psychology and there's, as you might expect, physics and chemistry, but also literature and philosophy and things that you might not immediately associate with mathematics. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's been my I don't know, I guess mission, just my tendency maybe is a better way to put it, because I'm not sure it's quite as goal oriented as a mission, but is to just kind of put math in dialogue with all the other subjects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel similar to you in that that I don't identify with mathematicians either whose like total obsession is mathematics. Although I love mathematics, I do feel like as I got further into my career, I wanted to know more about student thoughts on mathematics. Oh, there's a little mathematician.
We've got a visitor.
That's all right.
Okay.
I like it.
No,
A new mathematician.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I learned to understand that that students' thoughts are far more important than mine, and how do I get more of those? And so I kind of identify with your ideas behind that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this maybe gets into what we'll be talking about later, but I think of, right, like what's happening in math class is we're trying to build this bridge from, for centuries, millennia, there's been this beautiful mathematical work done all throughout the world. And like human beings just like us have been having really clever thoughts to solve problems. Dada and Casey, yeah, that's right.
Two dadas and two cheeks.
Oh yeah, it's right on our screen. You can see both of us. So this is interesting insight of how she thinks. Like when in a picture book, if there's multiple, on the left page and the right page, you see the same character because it's two images. She's just at the cusp of sort of realizing that those are different moments in the story, as opposed to like, oh, there's a duplicate of, there's Arthur everywhere. A lot of Arthur on this page. Anyway, sorry, yeah, right. Always interesting to explore, right? And I guess anyway, that sort of ties into what I was saying, which is you're trying to build this bridge between this existing body of the discipline, and there is a discipline out there to master, and then the student who's coming in with all their ideas and their experiences. Second, and so you need both sides of it, right? Like you're right. It's sort of, I think the more common way of erring as a teacher is the one that I've done when I've made mistakes in the classroom, or more commonly like my knowledge of the discipline kind of overpowering or towering over the students getting to express their thoughts and their ideas. But it's, of course, it's not that I want to banish the discipline from my classroom. It's that I want to put these in dialogue. I want to get the students. I want to start building that bridge from both sides, from their own thoughts and experiences, and from like, okay, what out there in this beautiful, well-established discipline can be useful for these students.
Yes. Can you please make that your mission? Everyone needs to learn that. If you could teach that to the entire body of the United States, that would be
right. I think, Oh, there we go. Right. How do we bring?
So let's talk about
that. Leads us right into like our main question of how we bring students into mathematical community, because I think, this is like, I would agree. I'm in the same spot. Like math is only interesting to me because of how students learn it. And because my background was literacy for so many years. And well, I guess now it's split, but it's about half and half. But the only thing I enjoy like the math games and things like that only because I think about like how kids react to that, and that idea of problem solving, that idea of like making sense out of something in a way that's different from like the traditional math classroom. And so having that opening, I think, is really
right. Sorry, Casey, I think, has a point she'd like to make. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as germane as what you were saying about the tension between the traditional math classroom. Casey, would you like some food? Can we get you some more fruit? Okay, sorry. This may be a bit of chocolate. Right. I apologize both again.
This is real life, Ben. This is real life.
In a way, I didn't anticipate.
This is why we go live, because we're like, you know what, whatever.
We're gonna fetch some fruit. We have a Tupperware with a decreasing amount of fruit. You want more fruit? Okay. You want more ravioli? We're getting ravioli is the dinner tonight, so she's getting some additional ravioli, which she calls raftaoli.
Oh yeah, you gotta make it longer.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. And she said that in front of a friend. He was like, "Oh, I just feel like I'm in Sicily, just hearing the smell the Parmesan." Ravioli. Thank you. You want to share that?
Ravioli.
Yeah. So, right. Right. It's funny. Right. You mentioned Heidi, the traditional math classroom, which is, I feel like I've had a somewhat tortured or complicated relationship with that vision of like the traditional math classroom throughout my career, because I think when I started teaching, this was I started doing, it was mostly 9th grade in my first year, and then the next 3 years to mostly 11th and 12th. But when I started, I think if you talked to me or read anything I was writing as I started writing about education, I sounded like a scathing critic of traditional math education. And I think if you stepped into my classroom on any given day, you'd be like, this guy's kind of traditional in a lot of what he does. He's like, he's up at the board. Like, yeah, it's not like
you wanted to be not
Yeah.
traditional, but you didn't know how.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think both my rhetoric and my practices changed, because I think there were like, hey, I don't know. I was 23 years old. I'd read Lockhart's Lament, which is a beautiful text, and been totally radicalized, and been like, all right, there's this is it. There's nothing of value in this traditional architecture of math teaching. I don't even know who it ever served, like some British guy in 1894, and like that was it. And it has no one since, and it's time to move on, and these practices just don't work. And then you want more fruit? And then, but as in all things in life, it's a negotiation, right? As I find every day as a parent. So I found it really, Lockhart's Lament, which that's a text both of you have interacted with, I assume. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. If anyone out there hasn't seen it, right, it's worth a read, because it's a lovely and energizing and scathing piece of writing that just sort of tears apart the architecture of math education as it stands, and is just this scathing indictment of like, what possible purpose could this be serving? And indeed, he sort of lands on the conclusion that the only purpose that this math education could be serving is to extinguish any natural love of mathematics that children might naturally feel. And like, it's such a lovely piece of writing, and there is a like vibrant truth there that he's touched on. But the more I thought about it over the years, the more I sort of thought, what's happening in the classroom, it's not that there's an obvious goal we're failing to meet. It's that schools serve a lot of functions, and math plays a lot of roles. And math is supposed to be helping sort of people develop quantitative literacy that they need to like participate in our very financialized 21st century world. It's trying to open the door in an equitable way to STEM professions, which is where a lot of power and wealth is concentrated in society. It's also trying to serve to like make STEM education more widely, because the people who hire STEM professionals would like to be able to do it more cheaply. And if there's a greater labor supply, there would be, so it's like not, anyway, that's complicated from both sides. And there also is this beautiful subject full of lovely ideas that we are as a culture trying to impart and pass along. And we're trying to teach critical thinking critical thinking and awake like the students' logical faculties, and help them sharpen those faculties, which aren't like, people are not natural logicians. That's a sort of artificial skill that you want. Sorry. You want to watch the thing on my phone? Okay. I grab a second screen. It's really a marvelous sedative. I don't know if anyone parented before screens were freely available. Anyway, but there's so many purposes that math serves, so many roles it serves. And so, of course, if you look at the math educational system and sort of like traditional math education by the standard of, is it meeting this goal or that goal or that goal? Like, no, it's not really doing a great job at any of them, because it's a very mushy compromise between a lot of goals. That was sort of that's where I landed, which is not a satisfying conclusion. This would not make, when I write this down, which I occasionally try to do, it really doesn't make as good a piece of writing as Lockhart's Lament, because it's sort of like, but it's I don't know. That's the truth I land on, is that it's a messy world, and this is where I come from. That as a teacher, as a writer, I kind of want to synthesize it all and be like, here are the many goals and how they all fit in this constellation. As a teacher, that's not really what teaching is about, a little bit, but it's really about, here's the goal for today. It's taking all that stuff and synthesizing it so that your classroom isn't an incoherent mush of goals, that like the students don't have to confront all those crisscrossing forces face on, that just like when they come in, it's clear what they're trying to do today. It's clear how they're trying to grow. It's clear what is being asked of them. Casey, I need you to wait. Anyway, but that was a long ramble. I might attend to her needs. I'll listen, and you can, as you share thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like you're so right, and I'm not sure that I ever really thought as deeply as you have about the purposes of math education, although all of those things ring true, and I would never contest any of those, but I'm not sure that I would have created a list and said, these are all the different purposes of teaching mathematics in schools. And they don't all really go together so cohesively. And in particularly not all at the same age level, right? Like creating these financial wizards is not really what we're concentrating on when they're in first grade and that type of thing. But I do feel like there's so much truth to all of that. And when you were talking about, having that one goal for each lesson or each time kids come into the classroom, you kind of set up behind that, starting in September, all of the other stuff that some of which goes to what you were talking about, right? Like that ideas of trying to have kids enjoy mathematics, like, and we're imparting all this knowledge to them and hoping that they'll bring their knowledge to the table. But you have to set a stage for all of that. And part of that is, the kinds of things that you're all about.
Well, and having that back and forth between, there's the research classroom and there's the study of mathematics. Like, I have a friend who's a theoretical mathematician who lives in the Midwest, and like he has no interest in applying mathematics at all. He's like, why would I be interested in that at all? And there is like that element of it, but so much of what we do in the classroom is imposed by the structure of that we are in, whether it's the British system or the US system or the Singapore, like whatever the system in which we're teaching education, and the mathematics that goes along with it is very different than the subject, big picture subject.
I fully agree.
Yeah, no, those are both. Yes, no, I like both of those perspectives. Of both. Actually, you're mentioning the just the contrast between elementary and high school. That's not actually something I'd thought about quite as hard in this context, but it's totally true. The perspective I just outlined is very much a high school teacher's context, where you have this tension between, like, once students are in undergraduate education or professional education, like they're just not all going to the same place. They're not seeking the same goals. It's like, so of course you start to specialize, like, okay, these kids are doing that, these kids are doing that. Like the goals just lead you on divergent paths. But high school is this moment where, like, they're still kids. I mean, right? They're 15. They're like, they've seen parts of the world, but they haven't like had a breadth of experience yet. It's weird to ask them to be like, okay, now you got to specialize that way or that way. So there's something uncomfortable about starting to split those goals apart. We still have this aspiration of universal education and like universal access to all different career paths. And at the same time, it's starting to get harder to hold all that together. Whereas in some sense, like, all of those paths, all of those goals begin with things like a deep understanding of numerals and how they represent numbers, and like a keen grasp of how addition and subtraction sort of like work on this idea of regrouping, and you can do some kind of rearranging, and that there's this more array logic to multiplications, like, so these like really deep structures of how the basic objects of mathematics work. Like you need that for all of those paths. So in some sense, maybe those particular tensions are not as like pertinent to an elementary school teacher. There's a very different set of challenges. I find the time I've spent in elementary classrooms like just makes me appreciate the wide variety of skills that I don't myself possess that one needs to thrive. But although I really like middle school, actually. Middle school in some ways is my favorite. In a way I didn't expect. I do love that age. When you can get the classroom to look like something other than a circus.
Yeah, that's true. That was where I ended up in middle school. I started out trying to become an elementary school teacher, and the jobs were so hard to get. But guess what? Middle school jobs weren't as hard to get.
Yeah.
So I ended up there, and I loved it.
Yeah. We had a friend of the family. This is a story I thought about when I started teaching middle school for the first time. 20 years after first hearing the story, but he became middle school principal, and his first day as like a teacher's aide, like the first day of what's going to be this like beloved career. He's a beloved principal, great guy. He was working with a student one-on-one, like a student who was really not, school was not this kid's thing. And so new teacher shows up, this teacher's aide is like, why are you here? And so this friend of ours said, well, you know how those high school teachers, Casey, hold on, please. You know, those high school teachers are all really smart. Kid goes, yeah. And so, you know how those elementary school teachers are really nice? Kid goes, yeah. He goes, well, I'm not smart and I'm not nice. Which is like, it was such a peculiar. Anyway, not the kind of humor I can pull off with students. It's like, that's just not. But anyway, I admired
Well, it totally
the stereotypes and just like, just either explode them or affirm them. I don't know exactly which one I was doing, but as a joke
like,
writer,
often at that age, they don't know how to take you either.
Right?
Like,
Yeah, definitely.
They're
Yeah,
so
kids on their toes.
No, that's
really
awesome.
funny. That's really funny.
Awesome response.
Can you tell us a bit about your books and how you see them as connecting students to mathematics?
Yeah,
or teachers to mathematics.
Yeah, I think the yellow one is probably the most relevant one for educators and for sort of what I do as a teacher. The yellow one is, so I've written 3 books. The first one was blue, and that one's called Math with Bad Drawings. And it's a very broad, kind of like a whistle-stop tour of mathematics, and in particular, places it pops up in the world. So in the introduction, I describe mathematics as kind of this like system of Mario tubes connecting these disparate parts of reality, or like in Clue, if Mario's not your game, right? If you're more of a board game person, right? Like there's that from the conservatory to like whichever other room it is, right? There's like this secret passageway. And math has a bit of that quality where, like, pi being a classic example, this is, in The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics is a classic essay that talks about how, like, wait, so pi, this circle constant, that's the ratio of a circumference to a diameter, like that shows up in describing like error rates and like the binomial distribution, and as that converges over time, like as n grows, like why would that, there's no circles there, why are there, so it probably just shows up all over math, or the sum of the squares of the reciprocal, like why would it show up there? And so, and that's sort of the math has that weird quality of these weird connections. So anyway, so the first book is about not about anything so abstract as the binomial distribution, really, but things like human genetics and lottery tickets and the Death Star as a spherical space station, and triangles in architecture. And so taking all these different places that math sort of undergirds reality, and finding those little Mario tube connections between parts of the world that are connected by the same mathematical structure. Then I did the second book I did was called Change is the Only Constant. That one's about calculus. And I guess that one actually, right, it's not as relevant for like K through 8. It's really just for students at that level of math more in high school. But it is sort of about trying to welcome students into the mathematical community. And what I hit on while I was working on that book, it went through a few different versions. And what I realized was that my favorite part about teaching calculus, and it's a subject I love to teach, there's a lot of things I like, but there's a handful of moments when you can kind of stop and be like, okay, we just learned some complicated rules of symbol manipulation, but there's this story that everybody loves to tell. And there's like this standard stock of anecdotes and stories that it feels like every calculus teacher likes to draw on, just these little tidbits and moments. It's kind of the, it's the like the hidden curriculum of calculus. It's the the unwritten textbook out there. And so what if we just cut all the stuff where you learn how to execute the mathematical steps, and what if we just taught the subject through, try to explain the ideas of the subject through those anecdotes? And so that book became kind of a storybook, sort of focusing on like the ideas of calculus, but along with those ideas, you get a sense of the culture of mathematics and the uses of mathematics, and some of the sort of like a more qualitative understanding of the discipline, in a way that doesn't always come through because we're usually in such a hurry to teach technical skills. And then, so then the third book I did is this yellow book called Math Games with Bad Drawings. And it's got a little over 70. There we go. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So pencil and paper games is a good way to summarize them. A few of them involve, little, not quite pencil and paper. They might involve coins or dice or something, but, stuff you have at home. the idea is, I describe it as being games that are more interesting than tic-tac-toe, but not as involved and hard to learn as chess.
Mm-hmm.
Which, like, there's a lot of space in between those, it turns out.
Right.
Pretty easy, chess is pretty hard. But stuff that like has some of the richness of a game that you can't just solve right off the bat. Tic-tac-toe, most 8-year-olds I meet have figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
And like these games, you're probably not going to do that. They're a little too intricate, too involved. But for that reason, they're a little more fun to play. You don't solve them right away. They keep generating new challenges. And the book has essays kind of connecting each game. I just chose the games to be fun. They're not chosen like, and this one teaches how to add fractions. It's like,
Right.
How to add fractions. They're just kind of fun logical structures, but showing how those logical structures do have resonance in mathematics itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one, I think, partly because it's a book. I hear from a lot of parents of kids as young as 6, actually, but I think at like 10, 11 is really kind of the sweet spot for a book like that, like upper elementary into middle school. The games really work at that age. And so it starts to give you just a different flavor of mathematics, a different look at mathematics than you get in school. Yeah, school tends to, particularly kind of
about the fun.
Yeah. It tends to give you a sense of like, okay, mathematics is this huge toolkit, and you got to learn each tool, and we're going to practice each tool each day, and we're going to learn. You're going to do 10 of that and 10 of that and 10 of that, and like that's part of learning any discipline, right? Like when I was trying to learn how to play guitar as a kid, which I did not practice, so I did not really learn guitar. But like you practice fingering the chords, you practice your scales. There's certain stuff you have to do. Like when again, I'm not a good racket sport player, but like occasions when I've tried, it's like you're supposed to, you got to hit a bunch of shots all with your forehand, and then a bunch of shots all with your backhand. That's part of it. That's like part of learning. But somehow in a lot of math classrooms, that feels like that's all of learning.
Yeah.
It's very weird to hit a bunch of backhands. Casey, hold on, please. It's very weird to hit a bunch of backhands and never play the game.
Yes. Well, and having a reason for why we might do some practice, I think is that part of it, and seeing number as something that can be played with. I feel like I was in some classrooms earlier this week, and it was just students were so afraid of getting something wrong that and I was like, well, I don't care. Like this is actually a whiteboard, so we can erase it. If we don't like what we're doing right now, like we can get rid of that and just put it to the side. Whereas I think games have that intrinsic kind of quality with them. Like it's okay to lose, like in a round, and then you come back and you try something else later and learn from that as you go on, versus that idea of right and wrong that is sometimes that encroaches on the math classroom in ways that can be more damaging, I guess is the actual word I'm looking at.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Yeah, I think weirdly games, even though the games in the book are like all competitive, and games tend to be like you're trying to win, somehow I don't know if it's making that overt somehow, but it somehow diffuses the competition. It's like it's just a game, or maybe what it does is it encloses the competition. So it's not that you're competing to be smarter or better at math, or like you're competing to win this little game where you write numbers and squares.
Yep.
And then once you've played it, as you say, that kind of gets you over the blank page problem. Like you've done some thinking, you've taken some logical leaps, you've tried something, you've seen what worked and what didn't, and now you can start having a conversation about those things. And so much of mathematics is that stepping back and analyzing what just unfolded and trying to make a logical structure out of it. And so, I think there's something there about, as you say, about kind of like getting a conversation going, getting something started.
But also one of the things that both of you were just kind of dancing around is that this idea of getting something wrong can be very valuable. And that's kind of like that backdrop that I was talking about that lives in your classroom, that's kind of separate from the content that allows students to flourish in your classroom. If they know that getting something wrong can actually lead to getting something right, and how do we deal with that idea? And in games that can be happening very naturally for kids, so it makes sense what you're saying. But that's not always the case in the classroom, as Heidi just described.
Yeah, no, that sense of safety is something I'm thinking about a little bit. I'm in just finished week 3 of I'm teaching a class, an intro statistics class at a 2-year college. And it's funny because it's like, oh, right, every term, there's some things that once I figure it out in the previous term, it's like I can just carry in my expertise. I know how to approach that idea. I know which tasks are going to work well for this idea. But like having the students feel safe being wrong in the class, it's like, no, it doesn't matter if I feel safe or like I feel like they should feel safe. What matters is like these students, these human beings right in front of me, they need to feel safe. And that's fresh. Like that's about a relationship. So that's not something where it's like, oh, I've done this 10 times, so I know how to make them feel like it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different for every person. And it's, I do get better at knowing how to build those relationships, but a relationship is a relationship. It's not, you can't be like, oh yeah, I'm going to reuse my relationships from last semester. Change the dates at the top, fall 2022, spring 2023. And like, no, that really warm rapport I built up with that student, I'll just transfer that to you.
Yeah, since you sit in seat 4, this is how I will interact with you.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Oh, awesome. Well, why don't you tell us how people can learn more about your work? Where can they go?
Yeah, I Twitter. Yeah, I'm getting more berries. What you could do is you could come to my home and demand berries. We do have berries around at almost all times, usually at least 2 or 3 varieties. So just come here to St. Paul, Minnesota, and demand berries. My email is just mathwithbaddrawings@gmail. That's generally a good way to get in touch with me. Although I suffer from a thing I think other people suffer from too, which is if you send me a sufficiently thoughtful and interesting email that like I'm like, oh, this needs a really proper response, it may take months or years. Like if you send me a really like slapdash email that requires a minute's thought from me, you'll get a response pretty quick. Okay. But like if you activate my sense of like, oh, this is a lovely person who really deserves a lot of thought from me, it turns out I don't summon a lot of thought very often. Anyway, so one way to get in touch with you is to send me.
I'm just gonna email and ask for berries. That's
not very careful email. If you want to send me a beautiful email, that's true. I would like really appreciate reading it, but just know you probably won't get a reply because my reply will never rise to the level of, like, you will never feel worthy of the email you sent. On social media, right, Ben Orlin is at the bottom there. Twitter had been until, I don't know, November or so, October, whenever the
evil overlord took over. Yeah,
had been my main social media platform. It still sort of exists. I use it. I still do use it, although somewhat intermittently. And at the moment, it sort of functions a little more as an archive. My blog is made a better place to find me. I've been running that blog for 10 years. That's really been sort of like the center of my presence, Math with Bad Drawings. And in general, right, my books are kind of that's where I've been pouring my creative and pedagogical energies into for the last 5 years. So those are the most useful thing out there that I've created. But Math with Bad Drawings has lots of blog posts, and the blog posts, some of them are essays on education, some of them are just silly cartoons, some of them are me thinking through a mathematical idea. So it's a little eclectic, but I like eclectic.
I like that your sense of humor comes through on your website, like in just any random spot. So thank you for that. I like it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Occasionally I'll write something and think like, okay, good, I've expressed the idea I want, and then it won't be funny at all. And I'm sort of like, oh, right, there's like people want, like, there's enough serious writing out there. I don't know. I don't like, there's people who do serious writing, and I don't know. I putting my writing into that camp doesn't always work, and it's like, oh no. But like if it's gonna bring a smile to your face somehow, that.
Well, I think it's like that mix. It's, I would say, like serious writing, but without taking yourself so seriously that you can't look at things from a practical perspective, or real life perspective.
No, that's fair. Yeah, no, certainly, I'm not trying to write substanceless fluff. But I try. Yeah, I do try not to. I certainly can fall into the trap of taking myself a little too seriously. So I try to make sure on the page that doesn't happen. You're gonna get more berries, Casey.
All right. Well, we're gonna give you back to Casey because I think she might
Casey,
need more than we.
Hold on one moment.
It's all right. It is all right.
Sorry.
We understand life.
Casey, I'm getting you blackberries. Here are the blackberries.
The other kind of berries were not the right ones.
Yeah,
Right.
well, the blueberries, well, it's all about how long they last, right? The blueberries will last in the fridge for weeks, whereas the blackberries go bad.
That is true. That is true.
Okay, anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you for lending us your daddy today. We really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you enjoyed your berries.
Yes. Enjoy.
She's having a shy moment, but yeah, thank you both so much. I know it's really enjoyable talking with you. Sorry for the
no worries at all.
Life happens.
Commercial
no worries. We get it. We get it. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. All right. Well, that was fun and love having a guest appearance and Casey. Yep. She's adorable. So next time we're going to be talking to Kasia Wittkind and on the 15th, but we're changing that time to 8 o'clock. So we hope that you will join us then. And until then,
we hope that you will keep math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. Bye.